Fall in New England can be mighty, mighty nice. Today, though, I believe I just have that feeling that today was that last day of really warm, nice, almost summer-like fall weather in New England. It has been so nice the last few days that we had a cool off last week, and my house just automatically cools down. Like if it's been cool the entire winter and then it could be warmed up for 2 weeks and my house is still cold. So my house just stays cool for some reason. And I've got to find out what the temperature is outside. And then I realize, hey, it's like 15 degrees warmer outside than it is inside. And the last couple of days have been like that, where I looked outside and I was like, man, it looks nice and sunny and it looks beautiful, but can it really be that warm? And then I look it up and it's practically 75 degrees out. So I'm like, I'm going to get outside and enjoy some last bit of almost summer-like weather. Good enough for me, 75 degrees. Beautiful the last couple of days. The Dairy Queen down the street. I love Dairy Queen. Anyone who knows me knows that I can put away ice cream like just about nobody. Unfortunately. And that's got to stop. That's got to stop. If anyone knows a good, like, core diet nutritional plan, like, I can't do it on my own. I can't like make up my own nutritional plan and stick to it. It just doesn't happen. So if you know something that's just regimented. Anyway, the Dairy Queen down the street, they only serve outside. It's not an inside DQ. So the last day of October, that's it. They're out for the winter, regardless of the weather. They're done. They're out. And so I had to make a trip down to Dairy Queen. I'll probably make a couple more next week before October 31st. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, everyone. Great to see you here at the Voice of College Football. Before you do anything, including giving me a call, leaving a comment in the live chat, or anything else, before you have even a thought of college football. Chris, before you have a thought about 1984, the real MVP, before you have a thought of what are my Wildcats going to do this weekend? They're on a bye week, right? And Cheryl, David, any other Buckeye fans, before you have any thoughts about Ohio State, Indiana, and any possible negative thoughts of a possible upset or just putting up 50 points in the first half, any of that, before you have any thoughts like that, hit the like button. Also, take the link from these videos, whether they be recorded videos or the live streams, the call-in shows. Take the link, go out on social media. So you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, you're on wherever. Those are really the only two I know. I don't believe that you can post a link on Instagram, from what I understand. Unfortunately, my Instagram account got hacked, just like my Facebook. I had about 2,000 followers on Instagram, hadn't really done much with it. I had about 2,000 followers, and I got to start over. So we've got about 12. But share the link out on social media. We got to build this thing up here at the Voice of College Football. We passed 30,000 a couple of weeks ago, so thank you. That has nothing to do with me. That has everything to do with you. So thank you so much for pushing us past 30,000 subscribers. Now we got to move on to 50. I would like to start adding on 2,000 or 3,000 a month. And we can get to 50 here in maybe 6-7 months would be good. Let's get to 50,000 and keep going right here at the Voice of College Football. Every so often, there's a kind soul out there that will say, I came across your channel. It's got 30,000 subs. Sometimes I'll get the response, wow, you got 30,000 subs. It's really not that much. It's like in the top, what did I hear? It's something like in the top 0.5% of YouTubers, but most YouTubers aren't real YouTubers. When I say YouTubers, I mean people that have an account on YouTube, but they're not YouTubers. They just have an account, just consume. They're just consumers. But We'd like to get to 100,000. Get to 100,000 by, what's a good goal for 100,000? Maybe by 2024. We could have a New Year's Day bowl party, 2024, 100,000. Let's do that. So this comes to mind because we were checking out some analytics this week, and we're going to talk some college football in just a second. So hang on. We looked at some analytics this week, and about 65% or more of the views that I receive are from non-subscribers. So that sounds like a high number. You would think, oh, people subscribe and they watch the videos, and then if they come across it and they like what they see, then they subscribe. So most of the people watching are subscribers. Nope, they're not. And that's actually a good number in regards to my subscriber base watching my videos. But still, at the same time, more people need to subscribe that watch the videos. There were like 150 or 60,000 viewers who came back to the channel that were non-subscribers, meaning people are taking in multiple videos and they're not subscribed. So please help us build the channel a number of ways. Like, subscribe, start there. All right. I wanted to look at the rankings because each and every week I release my top 25. That actually makes sense. It's not just the top 25. It actually makes sense. So you would think for all these decades, you would come across the top 25 and what used to be the top 20. I've educated some people on that recently. Several people, I was surprised that didn't know that it was the top 25. Younger people, of course, 1989 was when the USA Today took over for the UPI and took on the coaches poll, and it turned from a top 20 to a top 25. Then the AP, I think, did the same thing the same year, possibly. But I grew up with the top 20. There was a top 10 during the 60s, I believe, from 61 to 67. So there was a top 20 prior to 1961. Then for some reason, they sized it down. Man, you had to be really good. Top 10. That's it. Top 10. Think of that. If you're the 11th best team in the country, forget it. We don't know. That's why I try to emphasize to all of you, it's just a ranking. There's nothing magical about 25. It could be 10. It could be 42. It could be 37. It could be 19. It could be anything. It could be, why don't we rank every team? Why don't we rank every team? Then there would be this stigma taken away, or this accolade taken away from, you have a ranked win. You're a ranked team. Okay, well, that means something if you've played 5, 6, 7 games, you built up a resume, and you're still ranked, and you're ranked high. Like, we're 7 games into the season, 6 to 7 games, depending on the team, into the season. So if you're ranked 3rd in the country, you're probably pretty good. You've probably proven it fairly well at this point. Rarely does a number 3 team in the country halfway through the season just fall off the map. But if you're number 24 right now, you might be good. You might be number 24 because nobody considered you in the preseason, so it took you forever to get ranked. Or you could have stumbled a couple times and you were originally a top 10 or 15 team that has stumbled a couple times, and now you're 24. Well, what about number 27? What's the difference between 24 and 27? It's the same as 21 and 24. Nothing magical about the number. I am seriously considering, starting next season, doing a different number each week. And I can imagine, because of the way I do the rankings now with people that don't get it. And I am so happy that this season, it seems like there's been more of a breakthrough than in previous seasons, where I've had people just right out of the gate say, love the rankings, understand what you're doing, don't agree with every spot. I don't expect everyone to watch it and say, oh, I agree with everyone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Of course not. But they understand what we're achieving here, what we are determining here. They get that. And I love to hear from people. This happens every week. I love to hear from people who say, Mark, I thought it was stupid. Didn't think it made sense. I've hung with it for a couple of years or a month or whatever it's been. I get it. I get it. You know what? I saw this team that did not earn their ranking, and the AP had them at number 6, and the coaches had them at number 7, and you said they haven't earned it. They're not ranked. And maybe they eventually do earn the ranking, i.e. Oklahoma this year. They have now earned a high ranking. They continue to win. If Oklahoma or any other team wins every game by 1 point, yes, I'm evaluating the performance beyond just the win or the loss. Yes, we're all doing that in college football. We have to. We have to. If we did not evaluate the opponent and evaluate the performance against that opponent, then we would just have all the undefeated teams in alphabetical order, then all the 1-loss teams in alphabetical order, then all the 2-loss teams in alpha. And that's how we would rank the entire nation. And there'd be a tie for number 1 by 7 teams right now, something like that. And then we would go to number 8, and that'd be a tie amongst about 30 teams. And it would just keep going from there. So Oklahoma, for example, I did not have a preseason ranking. I had a way too early top 25, and that was after the national championship game 2020. And I delivered a way too early top 25 because people like it. I wasn't going to do one, but people like it. So I delivered one. Maybe I should dig up that way too early top 25 and see how many people jumped all over me. Who is my number 1 team in that way too early top 25? They wear red and black. And I would love to go back and see how many people said I was a moron. I was an idiot. For making that team number 1. Yeah. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, everyone. The phone lines are open right now, 860-499-3332. I will post the number at the bottom of the screen here in just a second. I want to remind everyone, though, that you can contribute here on the Super Chat, of course. You can also bypass YouTube, our friends at YouTube who make this all possible. So we have a great relationship with our friends at YouTube. But consider that you can bypass YouTube by supporting me directly at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Please consider that. Here at the Voice of College Football. Let me get to this call. We'll get going. And before I take this call, because I have set up a topic, as I typically do, we don't have to talk about the topic. You guys produce the show. Your comments, your calls, they produce the show. I'm a puppet. I do whatever you guys want. I talk about whatever you want. In college football, George, in college football. But at the same time, I like to present a topic. So I got to thinking, okay, I need to respond to the rankings reaction that I get. Plus, I've been presenting conference power rankings. And of course, there's a response there. So I'm going to look at those. And then on top of that, November 2nd. So we're going to play 2 more football games. And then the College Football Playoff Selection Committee is going to make their presence known and release their rankings. And as part of this conversation, I'd like to know whose rankings make sense and what should these rankings entail. We currently have a situation where Oregon has the same record as Ohio State. Who should be ranked higher? Most people think Ohio State's a better team. They played, yeah. Oregon, that's right. I think I might have watched that game. Oregon beat Ohio State. All right, let's get to the phone lines here at the Voice of College Football. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's the real MVP. How you doing?
The real MVP. Nice. You've already been heard from. I already mentioned you tonight.
Yeah, I know. It was privileged to be mentioned.
I'm sure you are. What's on your mind tonight, sir?
Well, I wanted to go a little bit more in depth with the topic since I thought it was interesting. And the two words I would like to start off the topic with is Coastal Carolina.
Love it. Go.
How'd they do last night? Lost to a marginal App State team. Blew multiple 10-point leads. Shouldn't have been ranked in the top 25. And if they were ranked in the top 25, should have been at the lower end. Not 14, not 15, not 16.
Amen,
we all
brother.
know the reason.
Preach it. Keep going.
The only reason the AP put them there was because they went 11-1 last year and they were a good story.
True. You are on it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I never bought into Coastal Carolina this year. Last year, obviously, that's a different story. But this year, I haven't bought into them. They're still, for their conference, they're a good team in their conference.
Sure.
I'm not going to take that completely away from them. But are they going to go out there and beat Texas or NC State or somebody like that? Probably not. And that's just the reality of Coastal Carolina.
And this is what's difficult.
To what they were.
The real MVP. This is what's difficult about ranking these teams is because we've got two distinct levels of football. And within those two levels, there's a bunch of different levels, but two basic Power 5, Group of 5. Okay, I'm just going to pick out a team. Arkansas. Arkansas is now 4-3. They've lost 3 consecutive games. Do we really think Coastal Carolina is better than Arkansas? I don't.
I'll even go one further. If LSU finished the year 4-8, I think they would beat Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, so that's where I have an issue ranking these teams because I kept looking at the opponents thinking their schedule is horrible. It's beyond bad. And I just refuse to rank them because I'm thinking, and even like Texas San Antonio, I finally slipped them in at 24 or 25 this week, but it's difficult to judge because they don't play anyone. And then with Coastal Carolina, they beat Buffalo by all of 28-25. And then this past week, I finally inched in Coastal Carolina into the top 25, but I have a difficult time looking at, like you say, a mid-level SEC team that's got 3-4 losses. They're better. So what do we do with that? What do we do with it?
I just say put them in the bottom of the top 25 or maybe on the outside looking in.
The real MVP, they've kind of earned it in a way. The wins and losses should count, but in a way, people look at that top 25 and that's supposed to be the top 25 teams in America.
I agree with that. The only thing I'm saying is if Coastal Carolina wanted to do it, they should have gone the same route as Cincinnati and at least scheduled people that they thought were good. Nobody knew Indiana. Everybody thought Indiana was going to step back. Maybe not this much, but at least they went out and scheduled decent teams. I mean, Coastal Carolina, they could have scheduled somebody. If they scheduled Pitt, for example. Not a world beater team, but they probably would have lost to them. And we're like, oh, okay, Coastal Carolina's not that good.
And of course, Coastal Carolina being where they're located, I would think it would be an interesting draw, interesting matchup to schedule a lot of SEC Eastern Division teams, ACC teams. You're in Carolina, schedule Virginia Tech, Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia Tech, somebody. So I'm looking at the top 25 to real MVP real quick.
Yeah.
We've got Texas San Antonio at 24. Again, what do you do with that? They're undefeated, and then, of course, Coastal Carolina. So it's really just the two teams this year.
San Diego State, 22.
San Diego State's 22. Very good. Yes. Even SMU. They beat TCU. What's funny to me, the real MVP, is that I've heard SMU mentioned by several teams, several people when we have these conversations, and they immediately go to the TCU win. They beat TCU. Okay, TCU's 3-3. They're 1-2 in the Big 12. Okay, if we were talking about a team from another conference, like from the Big Ten or the SEC, and we said, well, they beat TCU, people would laugh and say, that's a big deal. but since it's SMU, that's a great win. That's their big win. There it is.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, at least, I'd try to say, but that TCU win against for SMU is probably better than any win Coastal Carolina's had this year.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I also want to expand upon the ranking idea because, as you know, Vegas doesn't use ranking in any way, shape, or form. They care about money. And there's a few games in the odds I would like to discuss with you, Mark.
Okay.
Wake Forest versus Army. Army is a 3-point underdog. Now, if you go by the AP poll, Wake Forest is the 16th best team in the country. Army's best win is against Western Kentucky this year. I mean, Army hasn't proven anything yet, and they're only saying 3, so. I know you're on the Wake Forest train, Mark, but do you think Wake Forest is ranked too high?
Am I in the Wake Forest train? No, I'm rooting for Wake Forest. I don't think they're that good. I think Wake Forest is 8-4 good, 9-3 good. They're going to face their 4 most difficult games, the last 4 games of the season. Their schedule is backloaded. I've got them ranked 12th. They're undefeated. And so I'm weighing wins and losses against opponents, against performance on the field. It's not easy.
No, it isn't easy.
I don't think Wake Forest is the 12th best team in the country. That's not why I rank them 12th.
They have the 12th best resume.
To me.
As of right now.
Yeah.
So I'll go, okay. Here's on the Oregon. I know you mentioned Oregon and Ohio State. Oregon is actually an underdog this week to UCLA. That's surprising to me. Well, nothing surprising to me in the Pac-12, but Oregon, again, AP poll, they're 10th, and they're an underdog to a marginal team.
Yeah, I just found that out yesterday. We did a UCLA segment, so I looked up the spread, and I was surprised. I would have guessed Oregon would have been a 5 or 6 point favorite.
Yeah. I think with the Ohio State thing, I've said this before, I'm going to keep saying it because I think it's true. Even though Oregon has beaten Ohio State's going to get in by the committee. And I think it's also if Oregon just had one good game outside of Ohio State. I mean, they've looked horrible. I think them looking awful with an awful schedule hurt them more than the Ohio State wins helped them.
It's really odd that they play one game against one of the best teams in the country. We'll see if that plays out, but it certainly has for the past 15 years, every year, and probably will again. It's just odd that they pulled it all together for one game, and then they're playing the likes of Cal in Arizona and Stanford and Fresno State. And you're right. I was just going through it last night. They've not played a good game other than that one.
Yeah. And none of those teams are good teams either. They're all marginal. Fresno State, unironically, might be the best team on that list.
Maybe.
That's how bad the list is. So I don't know what to think of that. I mean, I would say they're a Jekyll and Hyde team, but they've been more Hyde than Jekyll. Anyway, so let me go through okay, here's the next game with the big spread. Number 8, Oklahoma State is a 7-point underdog against Iowa State. Oklahoma State is 8th in the country according to the AP poll. Iowa State doesn't even have a vote to be in the top 25, but yet they're a whole touchdown favorite. Is it just, you know how the AP poll, they use everybody knows this. They use the bigger names and they get them more status and they're higher up just because of who they are. But, what does Oklahoma State have to do to show they're a good football team? Because they beat a good Texas team. They've beaten everybody they faced. Iowa State's really disappointing this year.
Oklahoma State.
Did that surprise you?
Yeah, I was surprised by that spread as well. And that's what's funny. Another thing that everybody has their different view on things, because I get this criticism. People look at the Vegas lines and say, well, so-and-so wouldn't be a favorite against so-and-so, so why do you have them ranked there? And they just bow to Vegas and whatever they say. Well, right now, according to Vegas, if we allowed Vegas, like a lot of people suggest to me and criticize me because Vegas knows what they're talking about, even though 41% of the top 25 games this year have been upsets, 41%. And that's including the Ohio State Army or the Ohio State Akron game and the Alabama Mercer game. That's even including all those games. 41% of the top 25 games have been upsets, but Vegas should be dictating our rankings according to some people. So even though Iowa State's 4-2 and they've lost to Iowa by 2 scores and they lost to Baylor, and Oklahoma State's undefeated with wins over Kansas State, Texas, Baylor. So they've got a common opponent. Oklahoma State beat Baylor. Iowa State lost to Baylor. And Oklahoma State also beat Boise State. If we base this on Vegas rankings, we should have Iowa State 10 and Oklahoma State 22 or something. They're not even really that close. 7.5 point spread.
And Alabama would still be number 2 in the country.
Yep.
Even after the loss of Texas
even after
A&M,
they lost.
it wouldn't be close.
You're right. Because that hasn't swayed Vegas on Alabama. And I'm not saying it should.
Right.
They have to see a lot before they move on a team. They came into the season, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, That's why Ohio State was a 15-point favorite against Oregon.
Yeah, that game it still doesn't make, every week of college football, that game makes less and less sense to me.
I'm pretty sure Ohio State would win a rematch, but I don't think what I think should matter. And I think if they both, I think if they tie for a playoff spot or have the same resume, then I know it's not going to be the same resume, but if they have the same record, I got to go with Oregon.
I know you would go with Oregon, but I honestly don't think the committee is. Well, how would your reaction be if Ohio State got in over Oregon and they have the same record?
I'm going to understand it.
Because this is likely.
Because what you just state, you just outlined Oregon's schedule. It's not been good, and they've not performed good against it. Ohio State's schedule to date's not been great either. Minnesota's now become the best win on its schedule. Minnesota's 5-2. They're a decent football team, beat them by a couple touchdowns. So actually, even though this is kind of strange, I understand when people debate the head-to-head argument and don't like the head-to-head argument, they will say, even though Oregon beat Ohio State, well, Ohio State's loss is better than Oregon's loss, even though they played. Ohio State lost to Oregon, a top 10 team. Oregon lost to Stanford, a 3-4 team. But Ohio State's their schedule strength is going to just go through the roof in the next 6 games. Now Purdue becomes a tough game on paper. Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State.
Yeah, that Big East division though. I think Ohio State's just going to lose one just because it's so difficult. I mean, anybody goes 3-0 out of those 4 If Michigan goes 3-0, Michigan State, Penn State, or Ohio State, I mean, that would be unbelievable in my opinion. They're just all really good football teams, all top 10 teams, and they deserve it too. They're all really good. They've beaten their opponents, except for Ohio State, who lost to Oregon, and Penn State, who lost to who did Penn State lose to?
Iowa.
Oh, Iowa. Yeah, they lost to Iowa, but they didn't have their quarterback in the second half, so depends if he plays. And then you want to talk. You remember how we were talking, Mark, about San Diego State and how they weren't for real, or what do you do with them? Well, Vegas is saying they're not any good at all because they're a 3-point underdog to Air Force.
San Diego State
Air Force,
beat Utah.
Yeah.
Who may go to the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah. Didn't BYU beat them as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
BYU should win the Pac-12 South Division. They beat 3 of the teams. They beat Arizona State. They beat Utah. They beat Arizona. They've got USC the last game of the season, and the way USC's playing, they're gonna be 4-0 against the Pac-12 South. They should have them go to the Pac-12 championship game.
They might win the Pac-12, honestly. And they still beaten up the 2 best teams in the Pac-12 South and Arizona State, Utah, record-wise.
All right, to Real MVP. I should move on to these other calls, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good talking to you, Mark, and have a great rest of your show.
Absolutely. You too. All right. I will remind everyone and take this opportunity while we're talking about point spreads to let everyone know that I'm on Patreon picking all the top 25 games plus some additional games. So it's typically about 18 to 22 games per week. Last week was a little light, but still 12-6 against the spread, 12-6 against the spread, 85-58 against the spread. Let's get that graphic up there. Where are we here? 85-58 against the spread. 12-6 last week. Plus, you get the predictions from 20 of your favorite media members. 20 of your favorites right here at the Voice of College Football on Patreon. We're having a bit of a friendly little contest with a 12-pack each and every week. Plus, you get Steve Merrill's Under the Radar Pick of the Week as well right there at the Voice of College Football. And I am in the works of trying to figure out what we're going to do during the offseason, in addition to, of course, per request, one exclusive live stream per week there on Patreon. Just sign up at MarkRogersTV. Go to Patreon, just search MarkRogersTV, or go to the link in the description section of any of the videos. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Drew. How are you doing?
Hey, Drew. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So the Real MVP actually kind of set me up because I do definitely want to talk a little bit about Wake and Army coming up.
Yep.
But I'll start out a little bit with this ranking thing because it got me thinking. I've like tossed this idea around with my buddies before, but what would you think about some sort of system where obviously we should keep the rankings? Like, to me, that's what makes college football, and there's like an art to it, and I think that's why we all enjoy it. But what if we got rid of, say, preseason rankings? Or what if we had some sort of system where, say, you don't have rankings until week 3 or week 4? It tends to work out for itself. Like you pointed to Oklahoma, they've kind of earned it. But I think what a lot of people, their issue with it is you have teams where it's kind of theirs to lose. And maybe we see, week 4 or 5, they don't really deserve to be here, but they haven't lost, they haven't done anything to lose it, so we can't justify moving them. Or conversely, maybe you have someone that was a little underranked and it's seen as like, well, that person has to unfairly climb out. So I kind of wanted your opinion on that. I've heard some people say maybe we should wait till even week 5. I think that's way too drastic, but I think a system where we wait and we don't rank teams until say week 2 or 3 could solve a lot of the problems. But I wanted your opinion.
It's so obvious that teams are ranked based on the perception preseason, especially early in the season. Then if they outplay it, if they outplay that expectation or they underachieve, then it will work itself out to a certain extent. But take Cincinnati, for example. If Cincinnati did exactly what they've done this season 10 years ago, Cincinnati, the same school, the same uniforms, the same deal, but it's Cincinnati with the perception of going into the 2011 season, let's say, they wouldn't be ranked number 3 in the country or number 2 in the country, according to the AP Top 25. People would be like, oh, wow, they beat Notre Dame. Cincinnati's probably pretty good. Maybe squeeze them into the top 25 somewhere. But they wouldn't be ranked number 2 in the country. They were ranked number 2 in the country because of the expectation and what we thought based on last season. So what you're saying makes total sense. I've always agreed with it, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I agree with it because, let's watch some football, see these teams play, see them play multiple times, and then after about 4 games say, okay, let's start ranking. Unfortunately, though, I don't think it's going to happen because even if you convince the AP and the coaches poll, okay, don't rank anyone. We're going to suspend this until, let's say, the first week of October. Some other media outlet or somebody's going to swoop in with rankings because people want rankings. So they're going to swoop in and they're going to become the standard. Some Fox, maybe somebody will pay more attention to my rankings and I can fill the gap. But whomever is going to, people want rankings. They just want rankings.
No, I agree. And I think it makes so much sense to do it that way, but you kind of took the words right out of my mouth. That I think it's just that void would be filled. It's so embedded into the culture of college football. I think there would just be people that they wouldn't be able to handle. They're like, what do you mean? It's week 2 and who's the number 1? It's just, they would go elsewhere. And even if it was quote unquote unofficial, it would still impact things. But I don't know, it still is an interesting idea. But the other thing regarding the rankings that I wanted to say, and the real MVP actually kind of made me think of it with the betting, is I definitely enjoy gambling on college football, but I think it's a pretty poor proxy for what we're trying to accomplish and looking at ranking teams. Because remember, the spread isn't necessary. I mean, so for example, we'll use Wake Forest. So I know quite literally what the spread is saying is Wake should win by 3 points. But that's really not what it's saying. Really, it's the bookmaker's way of saying what number can we throw out that will attract the most amount of attention to this game either way. So that's why I think it's a poor proxy. And also, what matters a lot about gambling is there's different websites where you can go and look and you can see the total amount of bets placed, but you can also see the total money that's been placed. So in other words, the easier way of thinking about it is, say 10 people bet on a game, but say there's $1,000 total that have been bet. If 2 people account for 80% of the bets, well, sure, you can say, well, most people are betting on the other team, but 80% of the money would be on the different team. So I guess I think gambling is fun, but I think it's a whole different animal, and I don't support using it as any type of ranking system, but that's just kind of my thought on that.
Well, I don't know if you heard the statistic that I pulled out about this season, and this is higher than most seasons, so it's an outlier, but still 41% of the games among top 25 teams, not among the top 25, by top 25 teams. So most of those games are played against unranked teams. 41% of them have been upsets this year. So Vegas has not been reliable. I shouldn't say it that way, because Vegas, obviously, they're way ahead of all of us. They are way ahead of all of us. And when they miss a game by a considerable margin, 90% of the time. We've all missed it by a considerable margin. So it's not like, wow, Vegas really screwed up this point spread and all these people took advantage of it. No, we were all fooled. They were fooled. We were all fooled.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what my point is. I actually don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'd be curious, and this will kind of segue into Wake if you want to talk about that a little bit. But I'd be fascinated to see if you look at all of the money that has been bet on Wake Forest Army, of that money, how much of it is on Wake and how much of it is on Army. To me, that is a real MVP's point. They care about money, but then I look at it as, you might just have someone, and maybe Army Wake's not a good example just because of the fan base, but like, for example, say like Notre Dame is playing another big brand school. Well, that game just has tons of interest, so you might just have a lot of casual people betting. But the people really putting the big money, that's where I would want to look. But going to Wake Forest Army, I kind of want, just because I'm a Wake fan, I'm nervous about this game, quite frankly. But I still think they'll pull it out. But I guess I kind of want your overview of the game briefly, if you don't mind. But then more importantly, I would like to push back a little bit with what you said, because you claimed that you think Wake's an 8-4, 9-3 team. But I guess looking at their last four, I see more, and I know it's squabbling over one game, but I see more like a 10-2, maybe even 11-1. And I guess in my mind, do you think they lose to NC State, Clemson, UNC, and BC? Like, do you think they just, because, I'm pretty I'm at least hopeful, but kind of wanted your opinion on that.
So they're 6-0 right now, and they've got Army and I believe they've got a Duke. Okay. So they should be.
So Duke should be a win.
They should be 8-0.
Correct.
Certainly Army's by the point spread right there, and Army going to Madison, Wisconsin last week, only losing 20-14, should give some indication to how serious Wake needs to take Army, and I'm sure that they are.
That's why I'm nervous. That's definitely why I'm nervous. Yeah.
I don't have any great insight into Army football this season beyond what we all know about how they approach each and every game, each and every season, because I haven't seen Army play this year. But I guess seeing Army play in 2005 or 2012 or 2017 is the same as watching them in 2021. We know what they're going to do. They're going to they're going to pass 6 or 8 times a game, and they just execute that triple option so effectively that it's difficult to prepare for and it's difficult to stop. You watch it just be run over and over and over, and you would think, why can't anyone stop this, especially with better athletes? But it's impressive, and of course they're generally not going to beat themselves, and I know that that's an easy line to fall back on with a military academy, but it's certainly very true with them and the program that's been built.
I mean, they can run the football at the end of the day.
Well, sure. Yeah. So I don't know about Wake Forest. I watched Wake Forest when things were interesting in the fourth quarter and overtime against Syracuse. I watched that. Other than that, I've not seen Wake Forest play a whole lot of football. I saw a little bit against Florida State.
Yeah, I can tell you because I've watched pretty much every game this season, and that's why I'm nervous about Army, especially, is because we can score. And, our offense actually, like, the joke I tell to all my buddies, I'm like, oh, this is actually like a real, I feel like for the first time, I'm like, oh, this is a real football team. But our defense has been so, but I think it looks especially bad against Syracuse. So I think it's good. I mean, it's one or the other. It's either we shut down Army's run and we win, by 10, 14 points, or if we can't stop their run, I think we lose. That's pretty much where I'm at with it.
Army ran for 3.6 yards per carry against Wisconsin. That doesn't sound like much, but against that defense, Wisconsin might have the best rushing defense in the country. That's pretty effective. And again, we already know what the deal is. They ran it 50 and they threw it 6 against Wisconsin. But their defense, so we typically gravitate to the Army offense because we know what what to expect and what they run. But defensively, for them to hold Wisconsin to 20 points, Wisconsin only threw it 15 times and ran it 43 times and gained 4.6 yards per carry. But obviously, they did a good enough job containing the Wisconsin offense, even though they moved the ball okay. Obviously, there weren't many possessions in this game. Both teams just grinded the thing to the nth degree. So there were few possessions, but our Army played that game. You could. And again, I only saw a couple of plays. It was on the Big Ten Network, but there were better games on, so I didn't see it. Yeah, I think Wake Forest is in for a heck of a game. And, I do like, I'm trying to think of your John Wolford, the previous quarterback. Ever since Dave Clawson kind of transformed this offense, you remember the days better than I do, 5-6 years ago, before Wake got good. Their offense was
I was in school then, actually.
Painfully bad. Painfully. The 3-0 game at Boston College or at home against Boston College.
Oh yeah.
Just painful off. And suddenly they got a quarterback. Who was the dual threat quarter? Hinton was battling with Wolford there for a couple of years. And then John Wolford turned into a really good quarterback. He threw like 30 some touchdown passes his last year. And they started to recruit better wide receivers, Scotty Washington and others. And here for the last 3 or 4 years, they've been able to throw the ball around. And of course, Hartman's a good quarterback. It's an interesting team. Unfortunately, you let Kenneth Walker get out of town.
I know that one still hurts, but no, it's funny. And then I'll let you go. But you talk about that change, and I certainly do remember those days. It's funny because I remember it was probably my freshman or sophomore year, but we were playing Florida State at home, and we were so bad. We got blown out probably like 40 points. And I'll just never forget, like, the whole stadium was just Florida State. They were all doing the chant, the chop, and all that. And I was just like, this is awful. I'm like, my team's just getting blown out. It's like, I feel like I'm at an away game. And now it's like, how the tables have turned. Like, beating FSU by 3 touchdowns and people actually talking about Wake. Like, it's funny to see. It's years like this won't come around often, but you got to enjoy them when they come. All right, Mark, have a good one.
I appreciate the call, Drew. Thank you so much. Have a good night. All right. Great to have everyone here at the Voice of College Football, including Falconer X. Falconer X. Ever thought about having Lamar Thomas, former Miami great, of course, on as a guest? I have not thought of that. Now that I've read your post, I have thought about it. Is there any particular reason why Lamar Thomas? So in the early days of Mark Rogers TV, before it was the Voice of College Football, the reason I named it Mark Rogers TV was because I knew I was going to talk about sports, but I didn't know exactly what sports when. So I thought, well, you got to brand your name. So Mark Rogers TV, that's where that came from. So then it only took a couple months before I determined college football all the time. And I used to reach out to college football coaches every off season. I would write a letter and I would send that to the sports information directors of every university in the country. And to make a long story short, it was just an exhaustive process, like the back and forth, trying to schedule coaches and obviously getting turned down by most. But the result was we had on coaches from, and I'm talking head coaches, Cal, Oregon State, South Alabama, Air Force, San Jose State, Ball State, and a few others. Anyway, about 10 or 15 coaches from across the country. The other thing I attempted to do was to have top flight recruits. I'd go through the ESPN or the 247 Sports top 300 players. I'd hit up all those guys on Twitter. And because of it, we interviewed Justin Fields and other people. But it's usually not worth it. Sit for hours and hours copying and pasting and looking up addresses and all this other business. email addresses and phone numbers and follow-up calls to try to track people down. But if somebody can get me in contact with Lamar Thomas, if I knew I'm not really wasting my time, or if there was a particular reason why I would have on Lamar Thomas as opposed to anybody else. But thank you for the suggestion, Falconer X. Appreciate that every time. But again, I'm not really understanding Lamar Thomas. Why Lamar Thomas? Maybe there's a reason. You can leave that in the chat as well. Another super chat coming in. It's red. I may have. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I don't see it. All right. So my apologies to whomever left a super chat that's red. I cannot post it nor see it. I can actually see it at the top of the screen. Oh, Falconer X. Thank you, Falconer X, for the super sticker. Appreciate that so much. I will tell you this, Falconer X. I will reach out to Lamar Thomas on Twitter, but if you could enlighten me to why in particular I would be interviewing Lamar Thomas. What's going on with people harassing Cheryl? Is anybody out there harassing Cheryl? This should not happen. What's wrong with you people? What's going on out there? I haven't seen any of it, but I see Cheryl responding, and we shouldn't have anyone harassing Cheryl. Cheryl's a moderator, but I would rather than her come in here and have to moderate all the time, just check on the chat, maybe even listen to me, and just relax. Also, keep in mind that we will be here until, we've only got about a half hour left. We're going with a Notre Dame live show. So keep it right here. Just stay right here. We're going to shut down the stream at 7:55. We'll be back at 8 o'clock Eastern time with Notre Dame live, which in that show, we're going to be talking about Notre Dame. But that doesn't mean you guys can't talk about whatever you want in the live chat. So we've got Nathan Erbach lined up and also Ben Belden and others to talk Notre Dame football as the Irish hit 5-1 take on USC at home this weekend. My apologies because I wanted this to be a longer show. I was going to start at 6, but then I had a record scheduled at 6. And then lo and behold, I got stood up. Can you believe that? I got stood up. So I got stood up at 6 o'clock. I would have started the live stream at 6. We could have been on here for a full 2 hours. But instead, I started at 6:30 to get the record in. And I got stood up. So we started late, or I would have been here. So we're going to have to hustle here. What else we got? So I am going to run a poll about the playoffs, and it's simply going to be, do you want playoffs, yes or no? You don't have to specify 16 or 12 or 8 or 4 or group of 5 or no group of 5 or how to set it up. Just, do you want playoffs or not playoffs? Christopher, for some reason, is against playoffs, which that's almost like being against the American way. I really don't understand. Maybe we could play these games on a computer screen or Xbox. Is that what we're looking for? We don't want to play playoffs. We do not want to have the teams actually play on the field. Seems a bit ludicrous. Ed, come on. Why would anyone care about Wake? They're undefeated. And even when Wake's not I care about Wake. I love Wake. There's a few programs across the country that I don't actively root for, I don't care if they lose, but they do have a little bit of a soft spot. Northwestern. I got a soft spot for Northwestern. I've got a soft spot for Wake. Who else? If it just had to do with losing and wanting these teams to be better, then of course it would be Kansas and Rutgers, but in Vanderbilt. But no, not necessarily. I don't know what it is about Wake, Northwestern, some Oregon State. No, not really. Okay, those two schools come to mind that I root for. I have a rooting interest in a very slight way. It's not like I watch their games more than I would otherwise, or I really care that much. But would it not be? This is the best ACC race maybe ever, certainly since 2011. I released my ACC power rankings today. I'm sure everyone watched them. I think I'm pushing 1 million views on that video. Actually, it has so few views, I may not do any ACC power rankings ever again. But number one, it was difficult to rank the conference because it's a free-for-all. Who knows who the best team is or the 10th best team? The 10th best team could beat the best team. Some people think that Pitt is the best team in the ACC. Pitt lost to Central Michigan. The ACC is not a good conference, but at least it's fun. It's interesting. And it's not interesting to some people because the winner will most likely not make the college football playoff. That doesn't matter to me. That doesn't pique my interest or suppress my interest in a conference championship race. If NC State or Wake Forest are 9-3 at the end of the regular season and they're playing a 9-3 Pitt team in the ACC championship game, I will be more interested in that game and will be more apt to watch that game than watching Clemson destroy Pitt, Virginia, and whoever else they've played in recent years, Miami, and just blow their doors off. I will be more interested in a competitive ACC championship game and will give all sorts of salutes to the winner as the conference champion, even if they don't even come close. And they won't, most likely, to the college football playoff, unless Wake can make the run. NC State, a bit of a shot as well. Should I even reference where NC State is ranked? Because I got to admit, I love when people reference the rankings to me throughout the week and I say, I don't even know where that team's ranked. I don't look at the rankings. They don't make sense. Why should I look at them? But sometimes I need to just, for example, for this conversation, NC State is 18 in the rankings. They lost to Mississippi State by 2 scores on the road. They've got a nice win against Boston College and Clemson. It's pretty much what they've done. I would actually, in addition to taking any super chat questions, of course, I'm always going to take those, and I'll take this call in just a second. The reason I was on here as well was to go through my top 25 that actually makes sense. The response to that, which is now at 271 comments, so I'm not going to go through that many, but Mike 3883. Mike, are you out there? Mike has a decent suggestion here. Mike says, I wish there was a site that would have multiple ranking factors where you could adjust and toggle the value emphasis of the factors to see the teams change in the rankings. It would have to score teams in each category and could provide an overall score. So I would not like this idea if it was just a set determination that this is worth this is worth that, because that would be tough to determine what's fair, what's valid. That's more important. But I like the idea of let's play with it and see if we de-emphasize points per game and emphasize whatever. Derek, it hurts to see my Oregon team so low. I've got them number 13, but I can't dispute your ranking system. It's solid. Mike, finally, Wake not being openly disrespected. I get the ACC is down, but they're still an undefeated Power 5. I think it's completely ridiculous that people actually think, and if this turns out to be true, that the College Football Playoff Selection Committee could eliminate and not select an undefeated Wake Forest. I don't even. I wish I had the money to replace all this equipment, because I would smash it all. I would go on such a rant if Wake Forest, or anybody, but they would be the candidate this year. Wake Forest gets left out of the playoffs undefeated. 13-0. Why are they playing? Why'd they even show up and play these games? All right. Welcome to the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Mark,
Yes,
please
sir.
do that.
Yeah, who's on the line?
Please, reasonable go.
Here we go.
Please,
Yes.
Let's have Wake Forest go undefeated and be left off, and you do a video of you smashing all the equipment.
I will
start a GoFundMe.
Oh, okay.
I will start a GoFundMe for everyone in Mark Rogers to replace all your equipment just to see that. I swear, if that actually happens, I would actually do that.
Only part of that would be me acting. Part of it would be legit. Like legit anger and just frustration. And I don't even know if anger would be the right word. Just like, like exasperation at who are these morons that we've entrusted college football to.
Oh, but yeah, I'm not kidding. You could actually even I'm not sure if YouTube does it or not. If you could somehow start a live stream that you have to pay a front fee or cover charge just to be able to watch it, that would be that would be breaking headline news, even more so than Tennessee fans throwing trash at their own cheerleaders. This would top even that in my book.
Probably not, but I appreciate the idea, the thought of. But for Wake to go undefeated, probably not going to happen.
Well, you never know, Mark. In fact, that's one of the drive-by shot 3 topics I'm going to give with you today.
Okay. First
one is yours and mine favorite punching bag that you lovingly did a video on either today or yesterday. The ACC. So haven't you kind of noticed in the last, 4 or 5 years of Clemson's dominance, the kind of talk everyone kind of whispered was, when this finally ends, when Clemson finally comes back down to reality, they stop getting these Superman quarterbacks for once, and, we see a regular, maybe good, but not elite Clemson team, who will be there in the ACC to kind of take over the reins, kind of take charge?
Mm-hmm.
As it turns out, no one.
Yep.
No one in the ACC has stepped up to the plate in that regard. Everyone thought, as you pointed out, that Miami or North Carolina would seem to be one of the two to do it. And at least in your power ratings, Miami is next to last, which is just so hilarious to me. North Carolina not even that far away from that. Even the team that actually beat Clemson, NC State, they lost, as you said, by 2 scores to a average to good Mississippi State team.
Mm-hmm.
Mississippi State is probably, if they're not 8th in the SEC West division, they're 7th. I mean, just in that, I'm not saying they're like last place in the SEC, but if you just look at the SEC West, I don't know. It's hard for me to put 2 teams below them as far as, power ratings, maybe LSU, and they beat NC State. And then Pitt is actually favored over Clemson, but they had a tough game with Tennessee. So
Yeah,
Mhm.
it is hysterical to me.
And I don't know
We
that they
finally
would
get a
beat.
year where Clemson
I don't know if
isn't
they
all
would beat
that and
Tennessee
no
right
one
now.
there to take up.
Yeah.
Is what?
I don't
I'm
know
sorry,
if
what'd you
Pitt
say?
would beat Tennessee now. I don't know that they would win that game now.
I'm not sure if they would have won the game if Tennessee would have started Hendon Hooker as quarterback in that game.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough.
I would love to see this happen, Reasonable Gump, that at the beginning of each season, we take whoever we think will be an average team in the SEC and send them to the ACC, see if they can win it. Which, of course, they wouldn't have because of Clemson the last 5 years and because of Florida State before that. But if you put them in the other division, they got a fighting chance of winning that division. They're going to be a serious factor, whether that's Ole Miss or Auburn or whoever about the 6th or 7th best team in the conference is. Send them over there, and they win that Coastal Division most of the time.
To be honest, Marcus, some of those Ole Miss and Auburn teams in these past few years, I'm not so sure that they could not have beaten Clemson on any given Saturday in the SEC title. I mean, at the least, they wouldn't get run off the field like Clemson did to every other team.
Yeah.
I don't think, at least. Auburn was actually somewhat competitive about the most recent games with Clemson that they played. So was Texas A&M, and Texas A&M hasn't been higher than 4th best in the conference.
Yeah, those were 7
so
and
maybe
5, 8 and
maybe
4.
this year we'll see how they do.
Yeah, Texas A&M teams.
Okay, so next topic I got. We've discussed this before, but I got to keep bringing it up. So I don't think I've ever actually asked you this. So as we all know, Oregon beat Ohio State. Second week of the year, I think. They've played like absolute garbage since then. If you put Ohio State in the Pac-12, I'm pretty sure they are road grading Oregon. If you give Ohio State Oregon's schedule, I'm pretty sure they're road grading all these teams with the offense they got. So at what point, I'm talking about the committee. I don't care what they do right now. I'm interested to see what they'll do if this actually happens, if you have to put up 12-1 Oregon and Ohio State against each other. But at what point in Mark Rogers' mind does the level of play that Oregon has been demonstrating, what point does it actually overtake their head-to-head win against Ohio State? If Ohio State wins out and they beat the likes of Michigan and Penn State and Michigan State, and then they probably beat Iowa in the Big Ten Championship, and they look impressive, maybe they're not dominant over those teams because those are good teams, but they've looked dominant over bad teams for the past 3 years. That's what Ohio State fans keep beating their chest about, and they think they have the best offense in the country now because of that. Oregon has played similar competition, and they look bad, and they actually lost one of those games. So, at what point in your mind does that actually overtake the head-to-head?
That's a great question. I did not know or anticipate that we would be at this point. Although I should have. Maybe it crossed my mind that I just can't get past. If Oregon continues to play as poorly as they have, and it is just ridiculous that you look at their schedule, take out Stony Brook, my word. So take them out of it. But everybody else, they've not played a good game. They've looked like garbage every other game. And they lose to Stanford, who's now 3-4. So Stanford's going to go 5-7. That's going to be their loss. So they've got just a horrendous loss. And then they've beaten a bunch of Cal's 1-5 right now. They barely had a goal line stand to beat them. Fresno State's losing games to Hawaii. Yeah, they're not that good. And yeah, if Ohio State, let's say Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State, they all turn out to be like 10-2 teams that are ranked 9, 12, they're in the top 10 or 15 in the country. And Ohio State's got a run of those games. Boom. They beat them all, beat them by a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, whatever. Beat Iowa. Let's say Iowa shows up. They're 10-2, the Big Ten championship game. They're number 11 in the country or whatever. Oh, they beat them too. Yeah, the recipes are not going to be close, but I just can't get by if. So there has to be some credit given to Oregon if they do whether they continue to play like this or they kick it into gear. They got to keep winning games. So they are going to be 12-1, regardless of how bad that looks game to game. It will add up to 12-1 in a conference championship. Their best win besides Ohio State, I guess, is going to be UCLA this week. They've got a 5-2 UCLA team that's probably going to go like 8-4.
Maybe whichever team they play in the Pac-12 title.
Pac-12 championship game, who right now Utah's in the driver's seat at 3-0, but only 5-2 overall because they lost to the likes of San Diego State and BYU. The conference is horrible. It's terrible. Somebody was trying to argue with me the other day. Well, it's really not that bad. And I said, no. I got my pad out and I go, I got the numbers right here. When you're 16-16, so the other conferences, even the Big 12's like 25-6 out of conference. Now I'm including FCS group of 5. Like every conference, even the ACC, for as bad as it is, 28-12 out of conference. The Pac-12 is 16-16. That means the FCS games, a group of 5, all those, they're like losing those games too. It's like, that's horrible. They're 3-9 against the Power 5. And they still have to play 2 games against Notre Dame coming up. They're going to be 3-11.
All right. So then, but I respect that. So even with all that,
I can't get past a team got on an airplane, traveled 3,000 miles, and beat one of the best teams in the country in their own stadium. Like, how do you get past? Why do we play the games? It's hard for me.
I respect that, Mark. So, because this example that we're talking about, it's not going to get any. We're never going to see a more extreme example of this. Ohio State's schedule and resume versus Oregon's is we are never going to get an opportunity to compare more extremes, polar opposites than this. And even with all that, and even we're hypothesizing Oregon keeps winning games the way they are, and Ohio State, I mean, it doesn't even matter how they perform against all 4 of the teams that we've talked about. As long as they win, those are good wins. Even with all that, you're sticking to, you're going to honor that head-to-head as long as they have the same record at the end of the day, which would be 12-1. That's consistency. You know, I do admire that. To be honest, I'm not quite sure which direction I'm leaning. Like if Oregon kicked it into gear, as you said, and they start actually, winning games by 2 scores, which every team in the Pac-12 they should beat by 2 scores. I mean, they just should.
Yeah.
If they were to do that, and they kind of turn into like a Clemson team where they sleepwalk through half their schedule, and then they realize, oh crap, we almost lost, or we did lose a game. We got to start actually playing like we're supposed to now. Then by the time we get to December, all of this is going to be forgotten, and a 12-1 Oregon, I think, would get the nod because if they started playing good.
Well, this committee,
if they keep playing like this, I just don't. I think the committee is going to take whatever excuse they can to give Ohio State the nod.
Yeah. Well, this committee is ultimate power, and we've got 4 weeks until the playoff has to be played after the conference championship game, and the selection is the morning after on that Sunday. Why don't they just round up Oregon and Ohio State and say, you guys meet in Kansas City. We're playing a game next Saturday, and let's settle this. Of course, that's not going to happen, but that would be fascinating.
It'll be fascinating, but I mean, there's too many variables with that. That's forcing 2 teams to play a huge, big, heavy hitting game. They're risking injuries that the other playoff teams aren't. And
in addition to Oregon,
so
the last thing I'll state on Oregon's side is that they were missing one of the best defensive players in the country, Kayvon Thibodeau, in that game. They were missing 5, not necessarily starters, but impact players, guys that play on their defense. They were missing all that, and they still won the game.
Mm-hmm. I'm not really an injury guy. I don't like people bringing them up, and because I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm just saying that it's way too easy to start using them as crutches or injuries crutches. And pun not intended, but using them as excuses of why they lost. And I kind of hate that. It's kind of petty and kind of pathetic when people do it. So I don't really talk about injuries, but I do see the point there. So the last thing I got with you also sort of involved Pac-12. So in your opinion, I'm going to tell you mine. I think USC is a top 2, not 10, 2 job in the country, irregardless of how they've been the last decade. I don't think that has any bearing on it at all.
Ohio State,
I think they
USC.
are. I think USC. I would say Texas, USC.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Texas, USC. Okay, interesting. All right.
Or, actually, maybe even the other way around. I haven't decided on that, but. Anyway, so I rate them higher than LSU as far as job goes. I think LSU's top 5-ish, maybe 6. I haven't actually cemented that, but somewhere around there. Now, you've said that you would take that your first candidates for both jobs really are Matt Campbell and James Franklin, and you said one more. But those guys, those kind of Big Ten or Midwest guys right now. I actually, at least as far as USC goes, I disagree with that. I would not go after any of those guys if I was athletic director at USC, and here's why. I think each brand of football has to have that, exactly that, a brand. I think USC football, and this is just, again, an opinion, this isn't based off much, but I think USC football needs to sell itself a certain way. I think in that way needs to be exactly what USC, where it's located, Hollywood football. It needs to be flashy. It needs to be fun. It needs to be basically an offense that is just lighting up the scoreboard all the time. Like, for that reason, if I was USC, I would throw a king's ransom at Lane Kiffin again. If I was the athletic director, I would first send an apology for how they treated him, because it was pretty dirty. But I would try and get a guy like Lane Kiffin, or like another high offense type guy. To me, these guys like Matt Campbell or James Franklin are rough, tough, vanilla football. It's efficient. But you know what you get with them, and it's not necessarily that exciting, if you know what I mean. And that's generally that's kind of like what the lifeblood of the Big Ten football has been for a long time. Ohio State kind of separated itself from that, very recently, but you know what I mean. Big Ten football is known for being big and tough, and I just don't think that's USC. I wouldn't go after a Big Ten-ish guy. If I was USC, I would find a young hotshot who loves slinging the ball around, making fireworks, or in Lane Kiffin's case, popcorn.
Where do you think Pete Carroll cut his teeth before USC and before the NFL?
I have no idea. Are you about to tell me he was a Big Ten guy?
Well, the reason I say that too is I get your point, and it's not that I don't think it's valid, because I do think that every time there's a big job opening, you can go to your canned list of these are the 3 best or the 5 best, but then you have to then condition that and massage it versus the job, the region of the country, the conference, just the environment and just the style of play and everything involved, the culture in that portion of the country and in that conference at that school. And it should be a different list. So I think your point's valid, and USC is not pick your power program in other conferences where it's competing against nobody and it's got everyone's attention regardless. No, they're competing with all these professional sports teams, and if they're not good, nobody cares at all. The Coliseum's empty this year. It's a morgue. So you need excitement. You need something going on there at USC in addition to winning. But of course, winning kind of, if you ran the football every play and threw 3 passes and won 12-0 and went to a college football playoff at USC, I just think winning takes care of it. But yeah, style of play. Okay. The point being that Pete Carroll and I think other guys that turned into West Coast, quote unquote, West Coast guys weren't necessarily West Coast guys.
Oh, but I don't think James Franklin or Matt Campbell are. I think they're past the phase of cutting their teeth. Like, I don't think they're going to change their style of play if they go to the West Coast. I guess, like you're implying, Pete Carroll did. Like, I guess that's why I kind of said I would find either a guy who's already established himself to be like that, like Lane Kiffin, or find some young hot shot who's lighting it up elsewhere. And if you go that route, the second route, you don't have to pay $10 million for him. You can pay him less, like Ohio State did with Ryan Day, and see the fruits of your labor, unfold or not. And if it doesn't work, you're not left with a $20 million buyout like LSU is with Ed Orgeron.
Pete Carroll.
Which brings me to the other part of it.
Now, I just wanted to verify what was in my brain about Pete Carroll. So here it is. Graduate assistant at Arkansas, Iowa State, and then secondary coach at Iowa State, then secondary coordinator at Ohio State in a season in which the Buckeyes were number 1 in the country, went to the Rose Bowl, lost to USC by 1 point. North Carolina State defensive coordinator before he went to the NFL. So just was making the point.
USC
not a West Coast
job?
Guy. Yeah, then he was in the NFL with he had 2 NFL head coaching jobs before going to USC, Patriots and Jets.
So he's been around the block, and I never knew that.
Yeah, his coaching days go back to 1973.
All right, so last topic here, the other side of the fence, more recent one. LSU get a big win against Florida, and then they do this weird delayed firing thing with Ed Orgeron the very next day. How did that strike you? Not only does the news break after they got a huge upset, but they're not even getting rid of him right there. They're letting him finish the season, but they're like, well, you're still going to be fired. Okay. Well, what if they beat Alabama? Because they're going, hey, that's cool. It's nice. You're still fired. Like, this is just weird to me. Not only that, but how in the world can LSU recruit anybody between now and December? They're going to walk into living rooms and be like, yeah, we're not actually going to get to school next year, but, we'd still like to see if you're interested in coming. I don't get this at all.
So, points well made. And if LSU goes on some kind of run, and their schedule is brutal the rest of the way, even going back a few weeks, these games that they've lost against or played against Mississippi State and Auburn and now Florida. So if you go back in Kentucky, and then it's just, it's more Alabama, Texas A&M, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a run of, except for their one FCS that slides in there before Texas A&M. It's like 8 consecutive games of just good teams, good or great teams.
Mm-hmm.
So that probably this won't happen, but it would be amusing to watch them go on this tremendous run and finish 9-3. Well, what would they do if they go 9-3 after they fired him? against that schedule, shoot, they should be ranked like close to top 5 in the country. Anyway, regardless, look at it this way, though, as well. Are they in a better position, they or anybody else? Let's say Miami, let's put them in that boat as well, looking at Manny Diaz, who's lost now 6 consecutive games to Power 5 teams. They're just in bad shape. And then you got USC, who actually did pull the trigger. So at least a recruit knows I don't have to commit to a coach who I'm hearing 20 times a day. He's not going to be here anyway. He's on the hot seat. He's gone. He's probably going to get fired as soon as the season's over. Versus, okay, they are moving on from here. And maybe they'll hire somebody before I've got to make my decision. And I'm sure that's got
to be the goal here.
That's got to be the goal.
They've got to find someone before early signing day. They've got to find someone.
So, and that could have been done either way. They could have fired Ed Ogeron after game 12, after the last regular season game, which is at the end of November, and still hire somebody before early signing day. I think this just shows, hey, he's not a good leader of that program. He's not. It's just,
I get it. It is interesting, though, that Ed Orgeron's about to not have a job when Dan Mullen still, the likes of Dan Mullen and Jim Harbaugh went 2-4, I think it was last year, still do. I realize Michigan's well this year, but it's just funny if we had this conversation last year that Coach O is going to be fired before either of them, and he won a national title. A lot of people might think that's ludicrous. A lot of people would think that.
We've generally seen situations where if a guy wins a national championship, then that buys him a lot of time.
Yeah.
And
a lot of time.
This is 2 years.
It's definitely off the field stuff. It's a lot of off the field stuff that led to this. It's got to be.
It's got to be, because it's a 5-5
Last thing,
season.
I watched your video with your LSU Odyssey guy, Longfield and Sullivan. Look, this goes out to the LSU administration right now. Please hire Pete Golding. Okay, every Alabama. Okay, now I can't speak literally for every fan, but trust me, I talked to a lot of Alabama fans. We would all be just thrilled to death. We would all start buying LSU gear and wear LSU hats and stuff on the street, and to support them if they hired Pete Golding away from us. You have no idea how happy that would make everyone, with the possible exception of Nick Saban, who has to do with the Alabama program.
Yeah,
please let that happen. I have no idea why they want that. I have no idea why he wants that to happen, but please do it.
Yeah,
Take this problem away.
I didn't challenge Lon on that, but it did strike me a bit odd. But I didn't go there. All right, Reasonable Gump.
All right, man.
I appreciate the call.
Good. Yeah, good conversation, man, as always.
Absolutely.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, man.
Bye.
So here's the deal. We've got a Notre Dame show coming up right now, 8 o'clock Eastern, 2 minutes ago. We're going to do our, let's see, The Flash did this. Do you remember this Super Friends episode where he runs around the world so fast? They needed to change something that it had happened in the past. So the Flash ran around the world so fast that it turned back time. So that's what we're going to have to do, because we got a Notre Dame show at 8 o'clock and it's 8:02 Eastern. So stay right here. Stay right here. I'm going to shut down this stream, start another one. We've got our guys, Nathan Erbach and some other Notre Dame contributors coming on to talk Notre Dame USC. And of course, you guys can talk college football, whatever you want, in the live chat. I will see you in just a minute.